Jim Mattis. After winning the election, the then president-elected was putting together his cabinet, and one of the first to be hired was the retired General Jim Mattis, also known as Chaos, renamed Mad Dog by Trump. He had a very productive meeting with the president-elect Donald Trump at Bedminster, New Jersey, and the two men reviewed several topics, and NATO seemed to be their divergent ground. Mattis and Rex Tillerson met. Tillerson, the incoming Secretary of State. They got along and exchanged views. The process serves the interest, Mattis likes to say. They both agreed on a smooth and collaborative relationship between the two departments, as Cohen and Albright did during the Clinton's administration. After the inauguration of the 45th president, he signed an executive order for a travel ban on Muslim countries. It created a controversy between General Mattis and some veterans group. A few months later, Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapon to kill his own population, including children. The US bombed and destroyed some military installations, but the president really wanted Mattis to destroy the runway instead of the capability to carry chemical weapon. Dan Coats and Jim Mattis discovered the truth about the way the administration works. As high-ranking personnel in the Trump administration, they both must deal with American adversaries, but also with the failure of an administration hesitant in front of every matter. Mattis confided to Coats that he doesn't tell the White House what he's dealing with because they may take an irrational decision. During the times Mattis was in virtual war with North Korea, as he tried to send them several signals to dissuade the regime from pushing forward in its dream to acquire a nuclear capability. Mattis worked on strengthening the relationship with his Chinese counterpart. He also didn't challenge the president's choice for the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff when Mark Milley was chosen on Pompeo and David Urban's advices instead of his protege David Goldfein, also known as Finger. Mattis realized that it was difficult to have a meeting with the president since he believes in everything he sees on Fox News and dismisses the fact presented to him. Mattis left the administration when the president decided to withdraw US troops from Syria. Mattis took it as a presidential betrayal when the president tweeted out a decision in which the Secretary of Defense was not being consulted. He then wrote a resignation letter before a final meeting with the president in the White House, where he personally gave his resignation letter to President Trump and left on a misunderstanding. A few days after his resignation, he was disparaged by the president on Twitter. Rex Tillerson. The political vetting was boring for him before he met with the president-elect. He was hired because of close relationship with Vladimir Putin and other world leaders. Tillerson impressed the president-elect with his extensive international knowledge on Russia, China, the Middle East. The president-elect liked him and offered him the State Department. After the president's first visit to the DMZ, known as the Demilitarized Zone at the border between North and South Korea, President Moon Jae-in of South Korea stepped in to intercede between North Korea and the United States. Negotiations were in place for the two leaders to meet in order to de-escalate tensions between the two countries. Secretary of State Tillerson's discrepancy with the White House on how to handle North Korea's matter is the main point of disaccord with his boss, who kept him out of the loop of negotiations between the US and the Korean Peninsula. While he was cruising the world, Tillerson is recalled from Kenya and fired by a presidential tweet. Apparently, because he had called President Trump a fucking moron. He was immediately replaced by Mike Pompeo, then CIA Director. Dan Coats. Mike Pence on the hiring roll invited Coats for a job which he didn't want. Director of National Intelligence, DNI. Despite his disagreement on several moral ground with the president-elect, Dan Coats took the job mostly because his wife Marcia convinced him by reminding him of his duty towards his country. The Senate voted 85-12, easily confirming him to his new position. He faced difficulties on the job because most of the times the president was reluctant to the intelligence briefings. He also had other concerns. He reproved of the presidential tweeting behavior that he saw as a real threat. The president's phone habits, especially at nighttime, was his nightmare, and he believed no one can fix it. When the White House announced Putin's visit to the US, he was stunned as to imply that he wasn't aware of that information. Coats knew that world leaders lied to President Trump, roll out the red carpet for him, and praised him. He was repeatedly pressured by the president to take a public stand on the Russian interference, but he gently declined to do so. He understood Iran was not close to having a nuclear weapon, contradicting the president's assumption and core argument for leaving the Iran deal. People close to the president wanted Coats gone. He has publicly disagreed with the White House several times. He then decided to resign instead of being fired by a tweet, even though the president didn't want him to leave. He finally withdrew his resignation after a tete-a-tete with the president. A few months later, he wasn't feeling good vibe about his job. He had a phone conversation with Jim Mattis, who had left the administration, and he realized he wasn't at the right place. Weeks later, Dan Coats was fired by tweet and replaced by Congressman John Ratcliffe. Mike Pompeo. Andy Kim, a CIA case officer, and Mike Pompeo was strategizing on how to handle North Korea through covert actions. After his confirmation, Pompeo pushed for negotiations between the US and North Korea that led to President Trump and Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un's first meeting in Singapore on June 12, 2018. This success will be followed by 2 more summits at Hanoi and in the DMZ. Both will be a failure because neither side is ready to give up his expectations. Washington, D.C. knows that Mike Pompeo is one of the few people whom the president listens to since he knows how to convey his message to his boss. Rob Rosenstein. Rob Rosenstein, Deputy Attorney General, was heavily involved in the firing of James Comey, the former FBI director. Comey's refusal to pledge loyalty to the president is seen as the main reason that led to his firing, in particular an honest loyalty. The whole situation headed to the appointment of a special counsel to take over the Russian investigation from the FBI. The decision was motivated by the fact that Rosenstein thought he was caught between the White House and the FBI. The special counsel's appointment created a presidential fury as he believed Robert Mueller, the special counsel, was going to end his presidency. Lindsey Graham and Trump had different view on the special counsel's appointment. The president wanted him removed and instructed Don McGahn, the White House legal counsel, to inquire Rosenstein to fire Mueller. After 22 months of investigation on the Russian probe, Mueller's conclusion was no collusion or whatsoever. No evidence of collusion at all. Bob Barr, the newly Senate-confirmed Attorney General, broke the news to Lindsey Graham, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The celebratory presidential response to the press he called "the animals." Under Graham's advice, America is the most beautiful place on earth. A few weeks after the release of what is now known as the Mueller's report, Rob Rosenstein resigned. Jared Kushner. He is seen as the de facto White House chief of staff and in charge of some foreign affairs portfolios, sidelining the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, especially in the Middle East. The State Department and the White House views diverged more after a debacle visit at the West Bank where a fabricated tape of Abbas was shown to the president and infuriated him. North Korea was the center of attention for the new Trump administration as President Obama warned him during their last meeting in the Oval Office. Kushner had difficulties getting his security clearance because of some lingering issues on his background check. His White House portfolio is all over the place: criminal justice reform, foreign policies, and other domestic issues. Trump wasn't going to abide with the One China policy in place since Carter era. In early 2020, Kushner thought the president administration was the best they ever had, as about all the people working for the Trump administration believes the president is saving the world, which is a good thing. Kushner praises his father-in-law and mentioned 4 books to read if you want to understand the president. He believes the president should build the Mexican wall to win re-election, and he was put in charge of the project. He runs anything political inside the White House while Brad Parscale takes care of the campaign and Ronna McDaniels oversees the RNC. When asked about some of his boss's false assertions such as, "I built the best economy in the country history," Kushner responded by saying that controversy elevates the message. On the first 74 minutes interview of 17 interviews granted to Bob Woodward, President Trump is praising the North Korean leader Kim and bragged about crossing the demarcation line between North and South Korea. He also evoked his impeachment that he always called a witch hunt. He then revealed the build-up of new secret nuclear weapon unknown by the world. 2 counts of impeachment held against President Trump, and he seemed not to be moved by what was going on in Congress. The second interview was also about the Korean Peninsula, Kim, Shinzo Abe and South Korea. The Singapore summit then veered on how he was winning on the trade deal with China. Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general's elimination was being planned. The question was how Iran is going to react. On January 3, 2020, a U.S. drone struck and killed Soleimani near Baghdad International Airport in Iraq. U.S. officials justified the Soleimani strike as necessary to stop an imminent attack. 5 days after the airstrike, Iran launched a series of missile attacks on U.S. forces based in Iraq. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, learned about the coronavirus for the first time and grew worried as he got more information about the new viral infectious illness. Same as Dr. Robert Redfield, the head of the Center for Disease Control, learned about the new disease and questioned the etiology of the COVID-19 and immediately sent 2 memos in the space of 2 weeks to the Trump administration detailing all the circumstances and the symptoms of the disease. The 2 scientists teamed up and dived into the new situation. They got in touch with their Chinese counterpart, trying to see if they can send their team of scientists in China for scientific expertise. But the Chinese turned down the offer, refused to collaborate with the US and downplay the virus. On Martin Luther King's Day of 2020, the president called Bob Woodward to complain about a new book on him. When he came back from Davos, Switzerland, he talked about his relationship with President Xi and was happy about a prediction about a Chinese tabloid who projected he will win in a landslide for re-election. He talked about his conversation with Jeff Bezos. The president has asked him to be treated fairly by the Washington Post owned by Bezos. At the same time, the president refused to condemn Saudi Arabia in the killing of Washington Post Jamal Khashoggi, citing a brand new deal his administration just signed with Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. The situation was getting worse in Wuhan. The US was also getting a few cases and thought it will not go out of hands. Huawei and its 5G came into play and believed to be massive national security threats, since the new network will practically be spying on all citizens if approved. The White House Coronavirus Task Force is created. As the Chinese shut down Wuhan, the US put a stop to Chinese travelers coming into the US. President Trump awarded Rush Limbaugh with a Presidential Medal of Honor, and a few days later he was acquitted on both charges on impeachment in the Senate. China was still not allowing the US to know much about what was going on with the novel virus. After a long phone call with President Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader declined one more time US aid and reassured the president, asserting the situation was under control in his country. A few days later, the US president downplayed the virus threat on national TV, claiming the virus was going to go away, especially when the weather gets warmer. At that time, US only has 11 cases. The task force also was spreading a positive message and stating the risk of propagation was low in the US. On the other hand, they warned governors to get prepared, as coronavirus has risen to national health emergency. At one point, Anthony Fauci said masks should be worn by sick people, not healthy people. China finally let World Health Organization scientists in on February 2020, and among them 2 US virologists. Their report was alarming and quite different from what was in the news, but they were not allowed to go to Wuhan, the epicenter of the disease. Right after that, the virus spread in Europe. US case 15 showed sign of community spread, as the women didn't fit the CDC criteria of coronavirus contamination. This was a wake-up call for US health professionals. Days later, New York State registered multiple cases. The president called coronavirus a Democrat new hoax. New cases were rising in the country as the president continued to say the virus will go away. Italy was getting worse and the virus was gaining ground. The president's closest advisors suggested him to shut down travel from Europe. World Health Organization officially declares COVID-19 world pandemic. Precautionary measures were given to Americans as the nation slipped into one of the worst health challenges of its time. Schools were closed nationwide, major events cancelled all over the country, and the nation went into a new normal, and the president declared a national emergency. The task force guarded and put in place new coronavirus guidelines, urging mitigation measures such as being 6 feet apart from each other, wearing a mask, and washing hands. The White House task force even went further when it recommended to shut down the country for 15 days to slow the spread of the virus. The country was in a race. A vaccine was needed as soon as possible. The president started calling COVID-19 the Chinese virus. The need for ventilators came up as cases were ramping up and more people were hospitalized. First-hand equipment was lacking for the US response. The administration had no choice than to turn to China to get the protective medical equipment needed for first responders. When the CDC advised people to wear a mask, the president said it's a voluntary action. He can't picture himself wearing a mask behind the beautiful Resolute desk. Testing was key, as it could help to find asymptomatic patients who can spread the virus without knowing. Unemployment numbers skyrocketed as people stay home as part of the country shutdown. The Congress passed Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, a massive $2.2 trillion economic stimulus bill, to keep the economy going during the country shutdown. In an effort to circumvent the impact of the virus, the president favored the use of hydroxychloroquine that he said has been out there for years, as compared to a vaccine that takes about 14 months to get it through the procedural approbation before you start using it. He even went further, proposing the injection of bleach into human body to kill the virus. The world learnt Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, has caught the virus and was in bad shape. The virus death toll went up to 20,000 and the US surpassed Italy for the first time. It underscored the inappropriate response against the virus. The president tried to open back the economy, but he got a rebuke from governors who said he did not have the authority in their states. He veered and finally acknowledged governors will be the ones to take a decision on when their respective economies will open. This was the leadership test of the president's lifetime. During the pandemic, negotiations with North Korea were put on hold, and some provocative moves by Pyongyang were not perceived very well by the Trump administration. Nonetheless, the president believes he has reached a major goal of his negotiations with Kim, which was avoiding war. Now that the president knew who is going to be his political adversary in the upcoming election, he believed he needed to stay positive. He focused his hope on vaccine and criticized too much testing. Trump's presidency has gone through a long list of situations: Russian probe, tax cut, trade deal, Mueller, impeachment, and now the pandemic, and the administration has also changed its face in less than 48 months with 4 chiefs of staff, 4 national security advisors, and other high-profile positions. The vaccine project is the only thing that can save this presidency at this point in time. The fallout of George Floyd's death led to a law and order response from the president. He wanted the National Guards and the Army on the street to stop a nationwide protest that was taking place. Despite recognizing being white and privilege was an advantage, the president said he doesn't relate to minorities' frustration, especially when a black man is killed by the police. The president said slavery was an atrocity and noted it as a situation that was been going on for a long time, and he has done better than any president for the African American community apart from Abraham Lincoln. The president also mentioned a systemic racial inequality in the United States. "It's unfortunate," said President Trump. The president since his 2015 campaign has always been in offense, and ever since the virus came in, he has been in defense, and the goal was to get him into offense again for the upcoming presidential election where the virus is his opponent instead of Vice President Joe Biden. If you liked it, please buy the book.